There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. You sleep a full 8 hours, yet when you open your eyes, your body still feels as if it's carrying the weight of the sky. Your heart doesn't ache, but it no longer wants to beat with purpose. Everything moves in slow motion, like a muted film where you're both the main character and the spectator, watching yourself move through the days. You don't cry anymore, but you don't laugh either. You just stay quiet, observing everything as it unfolds. The work, the conversations, the meals, the people passing by, as if all of it were happening somewhere far away, dim and detached, no longer connected to you. Maybe the scariest part isn't that you're sad, but that no emotion feels strong enough to make you care. Each morning, you still do everything you're supposed to. Brush your teeth, get dressed, check your phone, scroll through notifications that flicker meaninglessly across the screen. Nothing's wrong, nothing's broken, but something small inside has quietly gone out, silent, unnoticed, and you don't know how to turn it back on. You tell others you're fine. You smile, you nod, you even make jokes. But in those moments alone, when the only sound is the slow hum of the fan, you feel yourself falling into a weightless space where time doesn't move and you're not sure whether you're living or just waiting for life to pass. Why am I so tired when I haven't done anything? The question echoes in your mind again and again, like a voice calling from somewhere deep inside, a place you no longer have the strength to reach. And in that silence, you realize something quietly devastating. No one really sees you. You're still here, whole, diligent, kind, but the part of you that's real is slowly disappearing, one quiet moment at a time. Some people live their whole lives slowly running out of themselves without ever realizing it. They wake early, work hard, smile, and answer the question, "Are you okay?" with a vague nod. Each day they take on another small role in the play called "I'm doing fine." They finish everything they're supposed to, on time, responsibly, exactly as expected. But beneath those perfectly scheduled hours, there's a small space no one ever touches. The place where feeling used to live, now replaced by quiet. You've been there too, haven't you? Knowing deep down that you're exhausted, yet still holding on to the image of someone strong, steady, and reliable. You smile when others need it, listen when they're tired, and stand firm when everything around you falls apart. And when the last light in the room goes out, you curl up silently. Not because you're sad, but because you no longer have the energy to pretend. There are mornings you look in the mirror and see a familiar face with unfamiliar eyes. No joy reflected there anymore, just a thin haze of unspoken fatigue. You still get dressed, go to work, reply to messages, smile through small conversations, but it all feels like a scene that's been replayed too many times. You're not really living the day, you're just passing through it, like a guest temporarily staying in your own life. What confuses you most is that nothing seems wrong. You haven't lost everything. There's been no grand tragedy. Everything is fine. The job, the relationships, the close friends. And yet within all that supposed completeness, there's an emptiness you can't quite describe, a sense that you're watching your life from the outside, through a clear pane of glass you can't touch. You call it a phase, or just stress, or maybe I'm just tired. But deep down, a small part of you knows this isn't ordinary fatigue. This is the weariness of someone who's been surviving for too long, someone who's forgotten where they're going or why they started. And maybe what's truly draining you isn't that you haven't tried hard enough, but that you've been trying for too long without feeling any meaning in it. You say you're fine, but really it's just the gentlest way of saying, "I'm too tired to explain anymore." Psychologists call this state emotional exhaustion, a stage where the mind and body have given more than they can restore. At that point, emotions don't disappear. They simply fade so you can keep existing. like a lamp that still glows but with dimming light, not because the bulb is broken, but because the power inside has run out. The human body has its own defense mechanisms when it's under strain for too long. The brain begins to reduce its dopamine response, the chemical that gives you joy and motivation. When happiness no longer brings a return, you become safer with yourself. Fewer expectations, fewer disappointments, fewer extremes. But that safety comes at a cost. You lose connection with your own heart. The mind never wants to hurt you. It simply learned one lesson from pain. If feeling hurts, then stop feeling. And so, little by little, you isolate yourself from yourself. You stop feeling excited, stop expecting, stop needing. You become stable, calm, mature, but only because you've forgotten what it's like to feel alive. The irony is that society praises you for it. They say you're strong, composed, and emotionally intelligent. They don't see that behind that calm exterior lies a frozen landscape you no longer know how to thaw. You've traded aliveness for safety, joy for control, and your own heart for the ability to keep walking without collapsing. Emotions don't vanish. They're just stored away in a locked room you're too afraid to open. Every time you try, you fear being swept under by them. Yet keeping that door closed is what slowly makes you forget who you are. You don't realize that in protecting yourself from pain, you've also shut out happiness. And perhaps the most painful part isn't that you no longer feel. It's that you still remember what it once felt like to truly live, but can't seem to return there anymore. You're not emotionless. You're simply surviving with a heart that once loved too deeply and has been disappointed for far too long. You want to rest, but the moment you stop, guilt rises like a tide. You feel as if you're wasting time, falling behind, disappointing someone. You long for peace, but silence unnerves you, because in the quiet, there's nothing left to distract you, no excuse to avoid the voice inside that's been waiting to be heard. You want to be understood, but every time you try to open up, you realize you don't even know where to begin. How do you describe a kind of fatigue that has no shape? How do you explain exhaustion when nothing in particular has gone wrong? You want to be listened to, but you're afraid that once you start speaking, you won't be able to stop. You want to cry, but the tears have forgotten their way out. Maybe it's because you've held them in for too long, until even your heart learned to stay silent. You want to disappear, not because you want to die, but because you just want the world to pause for a while, long enough for you to take one deep breath without feeling guilty for it. So you keep going, waking up, working, smiling, talking, completing everything like a clock, still ticking even as its battery fades. You say, "I'm fine." You say, "Just a little tired." You say, "This will pass." You hope that if you say it enough times, maybe one day it'll become true. But the more you say it, the farther you drift from the words themselves. You repeat the same cycle: effort, fatigue, self-blame, effort again. It's like running endlessly on a wheel without knowing where it leads. The harder you try to escape, the more trapped you feel. No one is forcing you, yet you remain imprisoned by the life you once built just to survive. And sometimes, in a fleeting moment, when you're driving through the rain or watching buildings fade through a fogged-up window, time seems to stop. The noise of the world fades away, leaving only the sound of your own breath. And in that fragile stillness, you finally realize it's not life that's exhausting you. It's the way you keep forcing yourself to be okay. You've become the perfect protector of everything: your work, your friends, your family. But you forgot to protect yourself. You're good at enduring, good at holding in, good at turning pain into graceful silence. But in the end, you're still the only one who hears the growing heaviness of your own heart. You want to live, but you're afraid of the very things that make you feel alive. A deep breath, silence. Everything seems to stop. And in that stillness, you realize exhaustion was never the enemy. It was a message from your body, your mind, your soul, gently reminding you that you've wandered too far from yourself. But perhaps there's nothing wrong with you at all. Maybe your body is simply refusing to keep pretending. It's tired of holding itself together every day just to appear fine, tired of hiding every honest tremor inside. Maybe this heaviness isn't an ending, but a message, whispering that it's time to pause and listen. You've lived in survival mode for so long that you've forgotten what it means to truly live. You've spent years trying to heal by being better, stronger, in control. But sometimes healing doesn't begin with doing something new. It begins with stopping the effort to become someone else. Not all silence is empty. Some silences are where the heart rests, where the soul no longer strains to prove its worth. When you start allowing yourself to be tired, to be weak, something miraculous happens. You no longer need saving. You just need yourself. When your heart stops resisting, everything inside begins to soften. And in that stillness, you hear yourself breathe, faintly, yet more real than anything else. You realize peace was never born from doing everything right or being perfect. It comes when you stop trying to be the version of yourself that keeps others comfortable and start becoming the person who makes you feel safe. You don't have to be happy all the time, only honest. You don't have to be endlessly strong, only brave enough to stay with your own feelings. Because sometimes the greatest courage is simply not running away anymore. When you allow yourself to be weak, you don't lose your strength. You're just using it to love yourself. Maybe what you need now isn't more motivation, but permission. Permission to be sad, to rest, to breathe. Permission to sit down and say, I've done enough. And if there's one truth left to hold on to, it's this: you are not broken. You are being reborn. Not every exhaustion is a sign of the end. Sometimes it's just the soul preparing to begin again, softer, gentler, and more true. You don't have to fix yourself to find peace. You don't have to fake optimism just to keep others comfortable. You are not an unfinished project that needs improvement. You are a human being, learning to breathe again, slower and truer this time. Healing doesn't mean you have to be happy all the time. It simply begins the moment you stop running away from yourself. When you can sit down, without your phone, without music, without anyone beside you, and still feel safe in that silence. You don't need to force yourself to be positive. Sometimes just being honest that you're tired, sad, or not ready to try today, that alone is a form of courage. Let your body rest. Let your mind breathe. Drink a glass of water without rushing. Take a walk without purpose. Listen to music without trying to understand the lyrics. Slow everything down a little, because the world will not fall apart if you stop running for a moment. You've spent so many years trying to please everyone, to be the one people could rely on, to ensure no one was disappointed in you. But maybe what you never learned was how to be gentle with yourself. Not because you were weak, but because no one ever taught you that kindness, too, needs to be directed inward. Healing doesn't arrive in grand breakthroughs. It lives in quiet, overlooked moments. When you pause in the middle of a busy day just to look at the sky. When you let yourself cry without shame. When you smile softly because you realize you can still feel. You don't have to race against your past or chase your future. Peace isn't where you're headed. It's how you are, right here, right now. In every breath, every heartbeat, every blink. In the space where you and the world finally stop being at odds. And if today you still feel heavy, that's okay. If you haven't found the light yet, that's okay too. Because sometimes the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still listening to these words, that's proof that somewhere deep inside, a small part of you still hasn't given up. You don't have to become someone else to be loved. You just have to stay with yourself, and that's enough. A long silence follows. No more analysis, no more reasons, only presence. Maybe being tired of existing doesn't mean you're weak. Maybe it's simply a sign that you've lived deeply enough to feel every ache that others only pass by. Not everyone has a heart so sensitive it can hear the weight of its own breath. But you do. And that isn't a curse, it's a gift. Perhaps you fought for so long that you've forgotten peace doesn't need to be earned. It arrives the moment you stop fighting. You don't need to turn the page. You don't need to go back to who you were. Sometimes, the next chapter of your life is simply learning how to live more gently, even when the world stays the same. One day, you'll wake up, and the morning light will still pour through the window like it always has. Nothing will look different, except that this time, you won't feel like you have to start over. You'll sit quietly, hear the birds outside your balcony, feel the sunlight brush against your skin, and smile without meaning to. Not because everything is fine, but because you no longer need it to be fine to feel at peace. Then you'll look around your room, the same chair, the same cup of tea, the same worn stack of books, the same muted light. But something will have changed, not in the room, but in the way you see it. Peace doesn't come from the world growing softer. It comes from the moment you stop resisting the softness already within you. Maybe happiness isn't a burst of light, but the quiet realization that you don't have to keep searching. You've been here all along. You just weren't still enough to notice. And when you finally allow yourself to stop, the world opens up. Not loudly, not brightly, but in a thin, gentle light that feels real. And maybe peace was never a place you had to reach. It's simply the moment you return and realize you never really left.